This video is going to look at the strange situation and the different types of attachment that a child or infant can develop. So what is the strange situation? Well, it's a lab study done using an observation. So it was conducted in first place by a lady called Mary Ainsworth, and it's used to investigate the type of attachment that an infant has. And what I want you to do now is just watch this video clip which explains what the strange situation is, how it's conducted, so that you'll have an idea of all the keywords that we're going to be using throughout this video. And I also want you to have a look if you can observe these 4 different behaviours that are being observed during the strange situation. So we've got willingness to explore, we've got separation anxiety, stranger anxiety, and reunion behaviour. So these are the 4 behaviours that Mary Ainsworth and her team would have observed during the strange situation. And I want you to try and see if you can observe when these things are actually occurring. So hopefully you've watched the video on Mary Ainsworth now and have tried to observe those 4 behaviours occurring. What Mary Ainsworth and her team did was every 15 seconds they would observe behaviour in behaviour categories using a tally chart. And these are the 4 behaviours that I wanted you to have a look for. So the first was willingness to explore. And this was, does the infant stick by the mother or do they go and explore their surroundings? And how this was measured was they had 16 different tiles on the floor. And they just record how many of those tiles the infant would cover during that period of time. The second one was separation anxiety. So does the infant show unease and distress when the caregiver leaves? We also wanted you to look at stranger anxiety, which is the distress that an infant feels and shows when a stranger enters the room or is in the room with the child. And finally, we have reunion behaviour. Reunion behaviour is how does the child respond when the caregiver is greeted on return. So as soon as the caregiver comes back into the room, how does that child respond? So we're looking for all 4 of these behaviours. Willingness to explore, do they show separation anxiety or not? Do they show separation or stranger anxiety or not? And what type of reunion behaviour do they show? So what Mary Ainsworth does is they have these 7 different stages here. Okay, we'll be going through these a little bit more in the next lesson. So the parent and infant will enter the room, then the stranger enters and talks to the parent and gradually will go closer to the infant. The parent will then leave the room. The stranger leaves the child playing alone unless they're distressed. The parent then returns into the room and the stranger will leave. The parent then leaves after the infants begin playing. The stranger then comes back into the room and then the parent returns and the stranger leaves. And in our next lesson in the classroom, we're going to be looking at what sort of behaviours we'll be observing at each of these different stages. So you don't need to know that for now. We'll be going through that in one of our lessons. And what Mary Ainsworth found was that there are 3 different types of attachment. As you can see on the side, we've got type A, type B, and type C. So type A was our insecure avoidant child. Type B is a secure attachment. And type C is a child who is attached with insecure resistant attachment. And these 3 children all show different types of behaviours in a strange situation. And it's really important you know how they all behave, so that when it comes into an exam, they might ask you, how would you expect a secure and insecure avoidant child to behave differently? So you've got to know how they behave in each of these different scenarios. So we'll look first, an insecure avoidant child. They're pretty much indifferent towards the mother. They don't really care that the mother's in the room. So they won't show separation anxiety. Okay, their play is not affected whether she's there or not. They might get distressed when they're alone. It's got nothing to do with the mother being away, but when they're left alone, they might show some distress. And they can be comforted pretty easily by a stranger. So our avoidant child really try to avoid the mother, don't really care she's there, not too bothered whatsoever. So that's your type A infant. Type B is our secure attachment, which the majority of the population are. And these can play happily in the presence of the mother. They're unaffected by the presence of a stranger as long as the mother is present. As long as the mother's there, they're fine with strangers. The mother's often ignored because they're trusted. The child trusts the mother to be in the room. If the child needs them, the mother will come and help them. They do get distressed when the mother leaves. and they also want contact and comfort from the mother when she returns. Okay, so they're your type B, your secure attachment, the one that most people will have. Finally, we've got our insecure resistant, and these are a slightly different type of child, and they're quite fussy when the mother's there, and the main factor that stands these ones out is that they get exceptionally and very distressed when the mother leaves. They will be crying, there will be snot everywhere, they'll be screaming, they will show high levels of distress when the mother leaves. They actively avoid the stranger when they're there, and when the mother returns, this is what stands this particular type of attachment out is they do something called a seek and reject behaviour. So they'll seek the mother out when the mother comes back into the room, but then they'll reject and resist their contact. So they'll go to them, but then push them away. And that would be your insecure, resistant child. So you've got type A, type B, type C. And in your exam, a good way of showing how an insecure and secure child differ is by going through those types of behaviours we observe in a strange situation. So this table is brilliant for that and a brilliant answer, a way of answering your questions in your exam. So if we look at a secure child first, then we might look at separation anxiety. They're distressed when the mother leaves. Stranger anxiety, they're avoidant of the stranger when they're alone with them, but they're friendly with the stranger when the mother is in the room. And reunion behaviour, they're positive, they're happy when the mother returns, they'll go and hug and cuddle them. A resistant child, on the other hand, shows intense distress on separation. When a stranger is in the room, they will avoid them. They will show stranger anxiety. On reunion behaviour, they do that seek and resist, or seek and reject behaviour. They'll seek out contact with the mother, but then push her away. Avoidant children, on the other hand, will show no signs of distress when the mother leaves. They might not even pay attention at all, not bothered, don't care about the mum leaving. Stranger anxiety, they're fine with a stranger, not too bothered at all. But having a stranger in the room is absolutely fine. They'll play normally when a stranger's there. On reunion, they show no interest when the mother returns. Might look at them, but they won't go and seek them out. They're just not bothered about the mother being in the room whatsoever. So once Ainsworth did her initial strange situation experiment with the 100 observation with the 100 American middle class children, she found that 66% of the children were securely attached, 22 were insecure, avoidant, and 12% insecure, resistant. So they were her findings of her study. She came up with these 3 different types of attachment as a result of her initial study. I suppose then the next question is, why do children show different types of attachment? Well, there's a few different theories behind this. The first one is the caregiver sensitivity hypothesis, and that the mother's behaviour towards the child is key. So if you have a sensitive mother, you'll have a secure attachment. If you've got an insensitive mother, you develop an insecure attachment. And the other theory is one that we've already looked at a little bit previously, the temperament hypothesis, that some children are just born more friendly, and those children that are born more friendly will be more likely to form secure attachments, whereas those children born less friendly are more likely to develop insecure attachments. And this is a nice little diagram to show you how mothering and your behaviour towards a child can affect the attachment that they develop. So if you get inconsistent mothering, sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're not responding to them, a little bit angry, then you're going to get this resistant child here. If you're an unresponsive mother, so you don't pay any attention to the child at all during infancy, especially during that critical period, then you're going to get an avoidant child. If you're very sensitive to the child, respond to their social releases, then you're going to develop a securely attached infant. So now we're going to look at the evaluative points regarding Mary Ainsworth's observation. And the first one we're going to look at is issues with the strange situation itself, and the fact that the initial study conducted by Mary Ainsworth lacks population validity. If you remember, it was all based on 100 American middle class children. So this tells us how this particular group is going to behave, how the middle class American children will behave, but can't be generalised to the wider population. If we carried out the study on someone else in a different country, we're unsure we'd get the same results as Mary Ainsworth's initial study. It also lacks ecological validity because it was conducted in an artificial laboratory environment. So therefore the results can't be generalised to other situations. It might be that the anxiety that the children were experiencing might just be due to the fact that they were in an unfamiliar laboratory environment. It had nothing to do with the caregiver leaving, it's just the environment was so artificial and so unnatural to them that that's what made them anxious. A further issue with the strange situation is that there is cultural bias, okay? Because it was only done in America, it only tells us how this particular culture will behave. It doesn't tell us how other cultures will behave. Takahashi did a study in Japan looking at the strange situation. And he found that Japanese infants are very rarely apart from their mothers. So when they were put into the strange situation and the mother leaves the room, the children show really high levels of anxiety. And as a result of that, they're labelled insecure, when in fact they're not. It's just in Japan, that's the way children are reared. They're brought up very, very close to their mother. So when you put them in the strange situation, they're going to be very anxious and distressed when the mother leaves, because that's not what they're used to. And we would class them as insecure, when in fact in Japan, they'd be classed as secure children. Also, another issue with this study is that it only focuses on the mothers, and the mother might not necessarily be the primary caregiver for that child. So the study might lack internal validity. It completely ignores the role of the father. Mothers aren't always the primary caregiver. In some cases, the father is, and the strange situation does not account for that particular behaviour. Another issue with the strange situation is that it does raise ethical issues because it was exceptionally stressful for the infants that were involved. In fact, 20% of the infants in some of the studies have cried desperately to one point. That study actually had to be stopped. So it is inappropriate to inflict that level of emotional harm onto an infant. And some of the psychologists have raised the fact that there might actually be a fourth type of attachment that Mary Ainsworth didn't uncover during her observation. And this is called insecure disorganized attachment, or disinhibited attachment as it can also be called. And this is where children show no consistent attachment patterns. They'll show distress when the primary caregiver leaves, but then they'll be very anxious also when they return. So Ainsworth may not have provided a complete explanation of attachment in her initial study, which becomes a weakness of her observation.